Well, didn't they do a great job? So our next segment is something called Grown-Ups Read Things They Wrote as Kids. So this is based on a CBC series where literally grown-ups read things they wrote as kids. So it could be letters, cards, anything like that. And it can also be correspondence, so it may not be something they necessarily wrote, but it could be something directed at them. So I have a couple things, and there will be 3 others after me. As a kid, I was quite visual, so I brought hats. I wore a lot of hats, and these kind of identified how I was feeling at the time. So I will start off with my initial hat. This was worn for the better part of 2-3 years. My mom can probably verify that. It's a beanie that my aunt got in Costa Rica or something like that, which was not really regular wear in Midland. So it's reversible too. It's got a really great sparkly underside. So maybe I'll put that on for the first one. It fits really well. It looks just as good now as it did then. So this is a book of stories where we were supposed to write stories and then draw a picture. Instead, it seems as though I drew the picture and then wrote the story. So here's the first one. There was a butterfly who had 2 babies. End. I saw 2 bunnies. They both had bows. And the last one. There was a queen and a witch. The queen turned the witch into a pig. It's some deep stuff. So moving on from that, some of you may recall this gem from the past. Again, looks just as good now as it did then. To start, I'm going to read, I think I'll read one of the poems first. Here is a poem about Pope John Paul. You have to admit, he's not very tall. But the impression he makes when he travels overseas is more like that of a Hercules. So, I know, it's pretty good. Huge surprise, I went to Catholic school. I don't know if you can tell. Before I do the last poem, I have an accord that I made with my sister. This was a written agreement, and it's actually quite cruel. My sister had acne when she was younger, and it was a point of tension between us, usually because I was not being very kind. So we had a deal. So this is the agreement. If I, Holly Archer, do not have a forehead full of zits by the age of 15, Lauren has to give me $10. If I do, I pay her $10. Signed, Holly Archer and Lauren Archer. The worst part about this is not only did I not get the forehead full of acne, she basically had to pay me for good fortune and not having acne, which is so cruel. And she didn't pay me till I was 19 because it wasn't okay until then. So, it's really a miracle she ever did. For the last one, I'm going to actually call out Kevin, who's going to be our next reader. Oh, so hello. This is Kevin. Kevin's come all the way from Orillia to join us today. You'll be seeing him later as part of our improv. Both Kevin and I went through a little bit of a dark period in our youth. Mine was inspired by the movie Titanic, which there's another letter about how I went to see it multiple times and how if you haven't, it's a shame. So hopefully you've seen it. So here's the poems inspired by Titanic. I apologize. Some people are moaning, others are groaning. Freezing in the ocean, there is no motion. People are crying, others are dying. The Titanic is done, there's no place to run. Say goodbye, because you will die. So, thank you.
That's going to be tough to follow, but I am reading from this book, The Mouse, the Snowball, and the Bundled Up Scare, which was a book of student writing published by the Simcoe County Board of Education in 1987. I was in grade 10, and I have no idea where this story came from. I was a nerd, I love science fiction, and I guess the assignment was write a science fiction story or write a story, and this is what I came up with. Alone in Space. No! The scream came from a small corner near the back of the ship. A small girl looking terribly afraid and alone looked around cautiously from her hiding place. "Why me? Why now?" she yelled, although no one was there to hear her cries. The trip was to be a routine pioneer mission to the Sirian star system until it happened. No one thought anything like it could have happened. It was an interstellar hijacking that left the 30 passengers dead, or so the terrorists thought. They had not thought to look in the small cranny where she had concealed herself. Now she was alone, not a soul around for at least 5 light years. She was about 12 years old. Her appearance, normally very tidy, was now messy and dirty. Her hair was straggly and greasy, and her jumpsuit soiled and wrinkled. Tears ran down her cheeks. Still sobbing, she decided to be brave and make her way from the rear to the bridge, nearly a half of a kilometer ahead. She would try to contact Earth's emergency radio station. The journey to the control center was not a pleasant one. The long, winding corridors, usually drab, were now littered with the corpses of the passengers. Each bend of the hallway brought new terror to the girl's already horrified thoughts. Almost there, she gasped as she ran around the last bend. There was a blood-curdling scream, and she stopped, stiffened, and could not force herself to take another step. The screaming continued as her eyes stared at the remains of the 2 people lying in a heap on the cold metal floor. Her screams turned to sobs as she collapsed on the floor beside the corpses of her parents. She continued to wail as she dragged herself away from her parents' dead bodies. She staggered to the heavy metal doors and opened them with a wave of her hand. The bridge was a cluttered mess, wires and transistors scattered haphazardly on the gray metal floor. She rushed to the radio, only to discover it was dead. So were all of the other controls, except for one green, glowing light on the panel of lights and buttons. She hoped it was the control to move the ship somewhere, anywhere where there was civilization. Her head dropped when she discovered it was not. The light shone over a brass plaque marked Life Control Systems. She knew she would stay in that place forever. She also knew she couldn't take that. She pushed the small, round button under the glowing beacon. The lights cut out, and all sound and motion stopped. Using her last breaths, she moved slowly to her parents to join them, wherever they were now.
That's such a hard act to follow. I have a letter from 1976, in the day before Facebook or the internet or cheap cell phone calls. This is when you phone home on Sunday to tell the big news, and then you got a letter maybe back. And this is a letter from my sister after she found out that I was going to get married. Dear betrothed, if this is a ploy just to get people to write to you, it's working. Joan, my only older, mentally ill, unmarried relative, what are you doing? You shudder to think of the home front reaction. Who is going home in 2 weeks? Who has to listen to mother all summer long? Joan, you don't understand the serious consequences. And grandma, oh God, my ears hurt already. Joan, what happened to places to go, people to meet, things to see, miles to go before I sleep? You realize our elder sister is getting on in her years, 25 large ones this year. I don't know if her heart can stand the strain. And Mom wants me to go into electrolysis. Who can I practice on now? Joan, you can't get married. You have ugly toes, a crooked foot, a bump in your nose, and no appendix. How foolish of you to forget these things. And you can't even spell. I rest my case. Your pen pal, Karen.
By the time I left Devons Drive Public School in 1994 in grade 8, I was handed a certificate for Ann Pickering for making a special effort in public speaking. One of my earliest works was When I Was in the Forest. When I was in the forest, I saw an alligator. And the alligator snapped at me, and I snapped back. I'm adding words here. And that's how the story ended. we have my school exercise book from Mr. Brooks, grade 2-3 class, one of the first people to ever call me Annie. And here we have an advertisement for Baby Talk. Baby Talk, she's fabulous. She's a beautiful baby. Price $100 over here. Come to Anne's right now. She says,
I love you, Mommy. I'd like to be picked up.
night, night, and feed me. Only $100 in cash or credit. Call 727-7003. That was my correct phone number.